Have you ever gotten into an argument and halfway through realized you were just wasting your time? That no matter how many points you made, the other person just wasn't willing to listen? These days, social media has become a full-on debate arena. People argue about politics, philosophy, behavior. Everyone wants to be right. But in the end, does anyone actually change their mind? Or is it all just about who can shout the loudest? This isn't a new problem. Thinkers like Schopenhauer, Lao Tzu and Nietzsche spent a lot of time reflecting on this, and believe it or not, they all came to a similar conclusion. Arguing is pointless. Schopenhauer saw arguments as nothing more than ego battles. People don't want to learn, they just want to win. Lao Tzu, with his Taoist view, believed that the wise don't argue, they observe, act, and simply move on. Nietzsche took it even further. To him, arguing was for the weak. The strong don't waste time trying to convince others. They just live their truth through action. Does that make sense to you? If no one's really listening, if debate has become just another game of pride and ego, why do we keep doing it? Maybe the solution isn't to argue better, but to live differently. But how? Is it really possible to go through life without needing to convince anyone? That's exactly what we're going to explore in this video. But first, tell me this. Have you ever tried to explain something to someone and felt like it was completely useless? Arguments have always been part of society, from the philosophical debates of ancient Greece to the never-ending clashes on social media. Humans seem to have an almost uncontrollable need to prove they're right. But do these arguments actually lead to any useful conclusions? For Arthur Schopenhauer, the answer is no. In his book, The Art of Being Right, he argues that people don't argue to discover the truth, they argue to win. Most debates, according to him, are nothing more than ego battles, where the goal isn't to learn, but to come out on top. When someone enters an argument, they're rarely open to changing their mind. Instead of seeking new understanding, most people just reinforce what they already believe. And if they feel like they're losing, they resort to rhetorical tricks and personal attacks. Schopenhauer points out several tactics people use to avoid losing a debate: changing the subject when they realize they're wrong, attacking the person instead of their argument, using big words to confuse others and sound smarter, leaning on logical fallacies instead of admitting they're wrong. In his view, human pride blocks us from accepting uncomfortable truths. If admitting we're wrong feels like defeat, then our instinct is to reject anything that challenges our beliefs. Most people think they make decisions based on logic and reason, but Schopenhauer says that's an illusion. For him, it's will, not reason, that actually drives our opinions. Once someone decides to believe in something, it's very hard to change their mind with logic. They might listen to your argument, but deep down, they're just looking for ways to keep believing what they already want to believe. You can see this in debates about politics, religion, or even everyday disagreements. The more someone feels threatened by an argument, the more likely they are to dig in their heels. Faced with this reality, Schopenhauer offers a different approach. Instead of wasting energy trying to convince someone who doesn't want to learn, the wise person chooses carefully when it's worth engaging, and when it's better to stay silent. He doesn't fool himself into thinking he can change people's minds with words alone. Instead, he observes, understands human irrationality, and avoids pointless arguments. That doesn't mean you should accept every absurd idea without question. But it does mean recognizing that not every battle is worth fighting. Before getting into a debate, it's worth asking yourself, does this person actually want to learn or just to win? Will this discussion lead anywhere? Or is it just a clash of egos? Is it really worth my time and energy? The internet has made this problem even worse. Social media is like a war zone where everyone wants to be right. Political, social, philosophical, debates. Everything turns into endless comment battles. But if Schopenhauer is right, most of those arguments are pointless, because most of the time, no one's really listening. True wisdom might be realizing that not everything needs to be debated. Sometimes, the best response to a weak argument isn't a counter-argument, it's silence. The truth doesn't matter in an argument. What matters is winning. So if no one's really trying to learn, why waste your time arguing? From a young age, we're taught that if we want to prove we're right, we need to argue. Whether it's political debates, moral discussions, or everyday disagreements, convincing others has become almost a necessity. But does that actually lead anywhere? Can you really change someone's mind just by having the right argument? For Lao Tzu, the answer is clear. No, the wise don't waste time trying to convince others, because they know the truth doesn't need to be defended. It simply is. Taoist philosophy teaches that there's a natural flow in the universe, the Tao. Everything happens in its own time, in its own way. When we try to force change, whether in ourselves or in others, we go against that flow. And when we try to win an argument, that's exactly what we're doing. Pushing against the natural course of things, trying to impose our point of view instead of accepting reality as it is. Lao Tzu says in the Tao Te Ching, "Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know." In other words, true wisdom doesn't need to be shouted. When someone really understands something, they don't feel the need to convince anyone. Think about someone you admire. Did they become an inspiration to you by trying to convince you of anything? Or was it simply the way they lived that earned your respect? Another key Taoist concept is Wu Wei, which means effortless action. It's about moving naturally, without force. In the context of arguments, this means trying to change someone's mind by force is just a waste of energy. If a person isn't ready to see something, it doesn't matter how well you explain it. People only see what they're ready to understand. Trying to force your opinion on someone is like trying to force a flower to bloom. You don't make it blossom faster, you only end up destroying it. While the fool shouts and argues endlessly, the wise person observes and understands. Silence and example are more powerful than 1,000 words. If someone truly wants to learn, they'll seek out knowledge on their own. If they don't, no amount of talking will help. Does that mean we should never speak up? Of course not. But it does mean we should choose our battles wisely. Ask yourself, is it really worth trying to convince this person? Are they open to a real conversation, or just trying to prove their point? Will this discussion lead anywhere, or is it just an ego contest? More often than not, the best way to teach isn't by talking, it's by living what you believe. We live in a world full of noise. Every day we see heated arguments on social media, political fights, endless debates about everything. But if you really pay attention, you'll notice that very few of those arguments actually change anything. Lao Tzu teaches that true wisdom isn't about winning debates. It's about knowing when silence speaks louder. When we live our truth without trying to force it on others, we naturally inspire those who are ready to understand. In the end, words are just words. Actions speak louder. The wise don't argue. That's why no one argues with them. We're taught to justify our ideas, prove our point, and argue to convince others. But does that really make a difference? Did the great thinkers and leaders of history waste time arguing with people who didn't want to listen? For Friedrich Nietzsche, the answer is clear. If you need to convince others, you've already lost. If Schopenhauer saw arguing as a battle of egos, and Lao Tzu believed silence was a sign of wisdom, Nietzsche takes it a step further. He saw the very act of arguing as a sign of weakness. To him, the strong don't argue. They simply impose their will and move on. Nietzsche believed logical arguments weren't about truth, but about control. In Beyond Good and Evil, he criticizes the Socratic ideal of reason, saying that truth doesn't come from debate, but from the power to force your worldview onto reality. He even viewed Socrates, known for his method of dialogue and logic, as a symbol of decline. Nietzsche saw him as someone who, lacking beauty or strength, used logic as a tool to dominate others intellectually. For Nietzsche, the truly strong don't waste time defending what they believe. They live it. Another key idea in Nietzsche's philosophy is resentment, the frustration of those who feel powerless. Instead of acting, they hide behind words. They argue about morality and justice, not because they want change, but because they lack the strength to create it. Sound familiar? Think about today's world. Who spends more time debating what's right or fair? The ones out there doing something, or the ones just complaining? Nietzsche believed most philosophical and ideological debates were really just masked weakness. Instead of acting, people argue endlessly, trying to get others to agree, instead of changing the world themselves. And that, according to Nietzsche, means they don't really believe in what they say. Because when someone truly believes in something, they act. They don't wait for permission or approval. At the heart of Nietzsche's thought is the will to power, a natural drive to grow, dominate, and affirm one's existence. Those who are strong, driven by this will, don't ask for permission. They don't try to persuade or debate, they act. They impose their vision through what they do, not what they say. The artist doesn't argue about whether his art has value, he just creates. The leader doesn't try to prove his strength. He takes action and earns respect. The thinker doesn't worry about winning debates. He shares ideas and lets time decide their worth. While the weak argue, the strong act. Why are we always arguing? Today, everything seems to revolve around endless debates on social media, TV, podcasts. Everyone wants to convince someone of something, but in the end, who's actually changing the world? Nietzsche challenges us to reflect. Are we spending too much time talking and not enough time doing? If you truly believe in something, why do you need others to agree with you? If you're right, why do you need to prove it? The truly strong don't seek validation. They create, build, and live. Maybe the best answer to a pointless argument isn't a better comeback. Maybe it's just a bold action. Anyone who needs to convince others has already lost. Schopenhauer showed us that most arguments are just battles of ego. Lao Tzu taught that trying to convince others is a waste of energy, and Nietzsche took it even further. Arguing, he said, is for the weak. The strong express their beliefs through action, not words. So, if arguing is pointless, what's left? Should we just accept everything without question? Ignore opinions we disagree with? Or is there a better way to handle all of this? The truth is, communication is part of life. The problem isn't talking, it's how we talk. Most arguments aren't real conversations. They're ego battles where no one actually listens. But that doesn't mean we should shut down completely. Not every debate is worth your time. Before jumping into a disagreement, ask yourself, does this person actually want to learn, or do they just want to win? A lot of the time, we waste our energy trying to prove a point to people who've already made up their minds. That only leads to stress and frustration. Nietzsche reminds us, the strong don't argue, they act. If you truly believe in something, then live it. Your actions speak louder than any speech. People don't change because of endless debates. They change when they see someone living with real purpose and integrity. Lao Tzu reminds us that the world doesn't need us to force anything. Just like water flows around obstacles instead of fighting them, sometimes the smartest move is to let things run their course. No one changes because they were defeated in an argument. Real change comes from within, at the right time. So in the end, maybe the best response to a pointless argument isn't a sharper comeback. It's the wisdom to know when silence says everything. If this video gave you a new perspective, hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you enjoy content like this, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And of course, Share this video with someone who always gets into endless arguments. Maybe this time they'll finally get the message.